I've called this talk The Emperor Theodosius and the Triumph of Christianity. Now, the picture that was on the poster is of Theodosius from a silver plate that was called the Nestorium and was given to him for his decennalia to celebrate the 10th year of his becoming emperor in 388 in Constantinople. It was made in Constantinople, and it doesn't just show Theodosius, of course, it shows other people as well, but at some stage it got broken up, and it's now to be found in Spain, in a museum in Madrid. So this talk is about the Emperor Theodosius, the last emperor of both Eastern and Western Roman Empire. He's regarded as the Malleus Minorum, or the hammer of paganism. In particular, the talk charts a lead up to the anti-pagan legislation by Theodosius of 391 and 392, which killed any hopes of toleration of paganism by the Christian establishment and paved the way to a totally Christian Roman state. Before I talk about this legislation, however, it's necessary to first introduce Theodosius, describe very briefly the Christian background, comment on Theodosius' early years as emperor, and then discuss the legislation before finishing with a brief account of the last 3 years of his reign. Theodosius is Spanish. He was born in 347 and he died in January 395 in Milan. Also called Theodosius, usually called Theodosius the Elder, was a military commander, so very successful. Theodosius himself married twice, and both his sons, Arcadius and Honorius, became emperors, one in the east and one in the west. He also had a daughter called Galla Placidia, who became very well known in the later 5th century when she herself became empress. Theodosius was an ardent Christian and particularly intolerant of non-Catholic Christian sects. He served under his father in the Great British Rebellion of 367-368 and then became dukes or leader of troops in Upper Moesia in 373, replacing his father, who was sent to put down a rebellion in Africa. Upper Moesia comprised the territories of approximately central Serbia, Kosovo, and northern Macedonia. He acquitted himself well there and then further enhanced his reputation in 374, fought and defeated the Quadi, a tribe from the Eastern Czech Republic, and their allies, the Sarmatians, who resided in the Ural Mountains. In 376, possibly because of restructuring after the death of Valentinian I in the west, his father was executed. Theodosius himself retired to the Spanish estates, as fully as the emperor in 379, after the disaster of Adrianople and the death of Valens. After the attack by Goths looking for land within the Roman Empire upon the Eastern Army, 40,000 troops and the best commanders as well as Valens were killed. Gratian, the Western emperor, Valentinian I's son, appointed Theodosius as the best choice of emperor because of his military background. Well, before discussing Theodosius' reign, I need now to look briefly at the Christian background. Constantine won the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in Rome in 312, and a year later, Christianity was made legal in the Western Roman Empire, later on in the Eastern. In 324, Constantine became emperor of the East as well as the West, having defeated Licinius, the Eastern emperor. In 325, the Council of Nicaea was held under Constantine's auspices, and they adopted the concept of the Trinity for Catholic Christianity, where Christ, God the Father, Christ the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all regarded as equal. However, there was another variant of Christianity called Arianism, which was very popular at the time, where Christ was regarded as inferior to God. It's important because some of the subsequent emperors were actually Arian. In 330, Constantine founded the new Christian capital in the East, Constantinople. He died in 337, having just been baptized, and his 3 sons inherited the empire. By 350, the only one left is Constantius II, who was emperor of the East. He is an Arian. In 341 is the beginning of anti-pagan legislation. Constantius orders the abolition of sacrifice, and 346, 354, and 356, we get more edicts abolishing sacrifice, closing temples, and stating that those who worship images are condemned to capital punishment. Constantius died in 360, succeeded by his cousin Julian the Apostate. Julian tried to bring back the empire towards paganism, but he died in 363 in battle against the Persians, and his successors were Christian. However, between 363 and 375, the successor emperors, though Christian, were tolerant of paganism. Things began to change in the mid-370s when Ambrose became Bishop of Milan. He's a new type of cleric, much more powerful than Pope Damasus of Rome, non-compromising Christian, but also very astute politically. Of course, there were important Christian leaders in the East as well, namely St. John Chrysostom and St. Gregory of Nazianzus, but Ambrose is a clerical leader with the most importance to this story. In 375, Valentinian died in the West, succeeded by Gratian. Having established the Christian background, we're now turning to the reign of Theodosius. Comes Emperor, as already said, in 379. The period from 379 to 382 is about stabilizing the empire, and particularly about bringing the Goths under control. In 382, he formed a treaty with the Goths, which formed peace. That meant for the remainder of his reign, another 13 years, the East was stable. And many Gothic soldiers came into the army, which had been decimated, of course, and this was a good thing. During this period, he also moved against Christian heretical sects like the Priscillianists. 381, there was more anti-pagan legislation on behalf of Theodosius, Gratian, and Valentinian II. Valentinian was a stepbrother of Gratian, much younger, and by now was associated with him in the Western emperorship. 382, Gratian refused the title of Pontifex Maximus. He took away permanently altar and victory in the Senate House, placed there in 29 AD by Augustus, and senators coming in would sprinkle some incense on the bishop of the gods. And he deprived the state cults, particularly the Vestals, of fiscal revenues. A senatorial embassy to Milan from Rome, the Western Senate, which was still largely pagan, is denied an audience with Gratian. He's assassinated, however, in 383 by a new pretender from Britain, Maximus Magnus, another Christian, who is recognized by Theodosius as Emperor of Britain, France, and Germany, but Theodosius was just biding his time. Valentinian and Ambrose hold court in North. In 384, they also dispute between Symmachus and Ambrose. This Symmachus was urban prefect of Rome, wrote official dispatches to the emperor, in one of which he tried to get the restrictions placed by Gratian rescinded. Yes. Valentinian II was, Gratian, of course, by this time was dead. Valentinian II was a child of 12, and under Ambrose's thumb. More anti-pagan legislation under the names of Theodosius, Arcadius, his older brother, and Valentinian II. During the 380s, continued the ban on some aspects of pagan religion, prohibited haruspicy on pain of death, decreed magistrates who did not enforce laws against criminal persecution, broke up pagan associations, and tolerated attacks on Roman temples. In 387, Maximus moved from Italy, Valentinian fled to Theodosius. 388, Theodosius finally came west. Maximus was defeated by Theodosius, and Valentinian was sent to Gaul. In 390, by this time, up to now, Ambrose has really been involved with the West. But from 390, he and Theodosius are face to face. He confronts Theodosius on two occasions and forces him, at least to some extent, to accept the rule of the church. First of the burning of a synagogue, a Christian Theodosius had about Ambrose, and Christians went unpunished. The start of medieval hysteria by Christian Jews. And secondly, where the reprisals ordered by Theodosius against rioting in Thessalonica got out of hand, and Theodosius again had to give way to Ambrose. So So we now come to the anti-pagan legislation of 391 and 392 with Theodosius. Symmachus was the pagan consul of the West in that year, and Ptolemy as consul of the East. Christianity triumphed because this legislation end of any worship and destroys the structure of even that of the household gods. There is anti-pagan legislation after this, and of course people were pagan. The traditional Roman tolerance. Now the legislation holds, there were two edicts in 391, which are almost the same. I'm going to read the first of them. This was sent in, from Milan on the 24th of February 391, under the seal of the Emperors Valentinian, Theodosius, and Arcadius, to Albinus Praetorian Prefect. This is the Praetorian Prefect of Italy and Illyria. Illyria is really the area of North Italy, going over into what is nowadays Croatia. Nobody shall pollute himself with sacrificial victims. Nobody shall kill an innocent victim, nor shall get close to sanctuaries, visit temples, and look at statues made by a mortal hand, or he will be subject to divine and human punishment. Judges shall be bound by the general rule that individuals profane rites and should enter the temple for the purpose of worship anywhere, and he shall immediately be compelled to pay a like sum unless they resist the judge and immediately report them back.
Hello, I can't hear you.
By public attestation. You can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me now? Judges shall also be bound by the general rule that if any of them should be devoted to profane rites, they should enter the temple for the purpose of worship anywhere, either on a journey or in the city. He will immediately be compelled to pay a like sum with similar haste, unless they resist the judge and immediately report him by a public attestation. Governors with the rank of consular shall pay 6 pounds of gold each, their office for a like amount. Those with the rank of director or prices, and their pay equal lot a like amount. The legislation of 392 went much further. On the 8th of November 392 at Constantinople. At this time, Valentinian II was dead under mysterious circumstances, so it was issued under Emperors Theodosius, Arcadius, and Honorius. Augustus to Rufinus was the Praetorian Prefect of the East. No person at all of any class or order whatsoever of man or of dignity, but or has completed such honours, whether he is powerful by the lot of birth or is humble in lineage, legal status and fortune, shall sacrifice an innocent victim to senseless images, or in any place at all, or in any city. He shall not, on more secret witness, venerate his law with fire, his genius with wine, his penates with fragrant odours. He shall not burn lights with them, place incense for them, or send wreaths for them. But if any man should dare to immolate a victim for the purpose of sacrifice, or to consult the quivering entrails, according to the example of a person by treason, he shall be reported by accusation, which is permitted to persons, and he shall receive a sentence, even though he is or with reference to the welfare of the emperors. For it is sufficient to constitute an enormous crime that any person should wish to break down the very laws of nature, to investigate forbidden matters, to disclose hidden secrets, to attempt interdicted practices, to seek to know the end of another's life, to promise the hope of another person's death, But if any person should venerate by placing incense before them images made by the work of mortals and destined to suffer the ravages of time, and if in a ridiculous manner he should suddenly fear the effigies which he himself has formed, or should bind a tree with fillets, or should erect an altar of turf that he had dug up, or should attempt to honor vain images with the offering of a gift, which even though it is humble, still is a complete outrage against religion, he shall be punished by the forfeiture of that house or landholding, in which it is proved that he served a pagan superstition. For we decree that all places shall be annexed to our fisc, if it is proved they have reeked with the vapor of incense. Valentinian, as I've stated, was assassinated in 392, making Theodosius the absolute ruler of the whole Roman Empire. In 394, there was a battle in the west at Frigidus, a place called Aquileia, which was right up in the western corner of Italy, almost as you were going over towards where nowadays there is a city of Trieste. Because of the death of Valentinian, his Magister Militum, his pagan Gaulish master of soldiers, had put up a puppet emperor in the West who tolerated paganism, though he himself was Christian. So there was a slight revival of paganism in the West in 393 and early 394. But this rebellion was put down in the August of 394, and all the people involved in it were executed or committed suicide. This was claimed by Christian writers to be a pagan victory, but in fact it really was Theodosius putting down another pretender in the West. During this period, Theodosius continued to act against pagans. They published a law in 393 that prohibited any public non-Christian religious customs. He was particularly oppressive to the Manichaeans, who were the sect that Augustine had followed before he became a Christian. He discontinued the Olympic Games after 393, and he ordered temples to be shut in 394 after Frigidus. The evidence of the numbers of pagan priests in Rome is telling. This comes from a book by a colleague, a scholar called Georg Rübker, which lists every priest in Rome from 500 BC to 500 AD. Now, I've used the priests of Vesta, which Symmachus is one as a model for this. In 374, there were 9 priests of Vesta. In 394, the year the temples finally shut, there were 5. In 404, there were 2. By 408, there were no pagan priests of any persuasion still active in Rome. Theodosius died in January 395 in Milan from oedema. He was only about 48. Ambrose delivered this funeral oblation a few days after his death, called De Obitu Theodosii, in which he praised Theodosius' suppression of paganism. Theodosius then was buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles in Constantinople, where Constantine had been buried before him. Although the empire was now not just officially, but in reality Christian, he was succeeded by 2 useless sons. Arcadius in the east survived, Honorius in the west did not. The Western court moved to Ravenna in 402, and in 410, the Goths, Arian Christians, sacked Rome. Thank you. I finished.
Thank you very much, Jill. Do you have some questions? Thank you very much for this wonderful topic. I can't hear you very well.
It's all right.
Okay. Do you have some questions? Yes, please.
said that they stopped them having statues and incense, the pagans. So when did the Christians start doing that?
Well, that's quite interesting. The early church fathers, at this period, some of the great church fathers are all alive. Augustine of Hippo, Jerome, some of the great Eastern church fathers, and they all write and fury, particularly Jerome, about all these pagan practices, processions, festivals, funeral feasts, incense. And yet, within probably maybe 50 years or so of this, they're being adopted by Christianity. The reason is, I suppose, people like them. They're a way for the public to celebrate. And the statues, for example, but now they're all right with the statues of the Virgin Mary or the statues of saints. The Eastern, in the East, Eastern Orthodox goes through a period about 200 years after this, that was called iconoclasm, where the church and the emperors at the time decided that you couldn't have statues. People worship the statues rather than the Holy Spirit. And of course, when we get into much later on, the 1500s, in the West, when you get the rise of Protestantism, that's another thing that's addressed. The Catholicism is full of statues, the statues rather than they do the.
Thank you. What was Symmachus' reception?
Sorry, say that again.
What was Symmachus' reception after his death?
Well, Symmachus in his own day he's one of the last patrons of Rome, because that's why I got interested in him, and that's what my thesis is about. This is sort of if you like. He was regarded as the best orator of his day, and he survived 900 of his personal letters, and 7 of these official dispatches to the emperor when he was urban prefect of Rome survived. And the Byzantine Empire, after we're now into the period when, of course, the Western Empire begins to fall to pieces, and the Eastern Empire, no thanks to the emperors, but thanks to a strong, if you like, state behind the continues. He seems to have survived. Byzantines loved his letters survived in the East, and he was regarded as a model letter writer. So that his letters, if you wanted to teach how to so that is why he survived. The first editions of his letters in the West, I think it was about 1580. I have an edition that dates to about 1617. Modern scholars of the Anglo-American scholars, he went through, continental always quite valued him, but British and American scholars, even for a long time, he was very unpopular because they wanted his letters to be like those of Cicero. I mean, you read letters of Cicero and you find a tremendous amount about what was going on in his who were very high and important, like Symmachus was. He was a senator, very wealthy. You had to be very careful in writing letters. You couldn't say very much. So the letters to us sound very dull, and they're also very involved because he was an orator and he wrote involved letters. But nowadays, things have changed in the last 20 years. Now he's been reevaluated by a new generation of scholars who can see him, give him the credit for the importance that in fact he has.
Thank you very much. Do you have some other questions, please? No? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Jill, for this.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been very nice to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you at last, and not in the flesh, mate. Yeah, but
Unfortunately, yes.